yes, social is important for some people, but I think increasingly social is not scratching the itch for, consumers of media, because we're getting fed so many advertisements and the algorithm is everything. But also for those of us who are concerned about, and I'm going to try desperately to avoid the term content creation, because I like to think I create more than just content. I actually think content creation it's in the same category as the word influencer. We don't need more influencers. We need leaders. We need people that think and feel their way through life and share that and create good art. We need neither content nor no one who wakes up and thinks, you know what I need today? My life is desperately lacking in content.
Never a truer word spoken, and he's pretty good at that, is David duChemin, who is back here for a new special this week as I finish up my time here in India. Actually, like last week, I'm recording this introduction in India, and I'll be in my final couple of days in Varanasi, as it goes, if you're listening to this on the day of release, as I say. So yes, today is a really concentrated edition on writing for your pictures, and I'm doing that through blog posts that I'm interested in that are on David's website. But it's a mix of stories about photography and the writing, which all of us do, really, to an extent, whether we pop stuff on Instagram or talk about it in other places. And I think this might get you thinking very differently about the value of a blog. So David duChemin came to photography through wildlife, some amazing adventures in remote places. He's spent years photographing animals in the wild, on land, and also in the sea, as it goes. And over time, his career widened. Books and workshops and teaching and mentoring photographers who were trying to work out not just how to make better pictures, but why they were making them in the first place. Because David is, which is music to my ears on this podcast, also about the why. Through all of this, his blog, David's blog, has kept running alongside the photography, not as an announcement board, not as a sales pitch, but as a working notebook, and that's really the premise of today's special. But heads up, when I open this interview, I do say it's all about business. Well, partly about business, which I suppose it is, in terms of tickling the feet of the algorithm and being noticed by the internet. But it's so much more than that, which David explains better than me, of course. I think there's a lot to learn from David today, whatever kind of photography you do, wherever you are on your journey. There's a fair amount of noodling too about just general photography here. But before we start, a quick but important mention to the members of our community who, through your kind membership to our Patreon for as little as a fancy cup of coffee per month, keep this show on the airwaves. You have your own extra show called The Extra Mile, which is this week a bit of a sneaky glimpse, actually, into my adventures with Lynn Fraser, who I run The Journey Beyond with. A sneaky look into a Bangladesh special to come, or listen, as it is probably better described. Also, thank you to arthelper.ai who support the show. If you've got photographs sitting on a hard drive and you're thinking, I'd love to sell these, but I don't know where to start, that's where Art Helper comes in. They help with the marketing, the mock-ups, the emails, all of that stuff for you. Go to arthelper.ai and enter the code PHOTOWALK for 30 days free on the Pro version. So, no letters today. This is the last of 4 specials where the guests have done all the talking in terms of the subject and topics. So this is somebody who's fast becoming a regular to this title, and I'm so pleased he is too. Is David duChemin.
Today on the Photo Walk.
For those who need to feed the beast, to put stuff out into the world, I would remind you that building your house on someone else's property is a dodgy proposition at best. I don't want to write articles that appease the algorithm. I want articles that appease me, because photography is so full of, little shortcuts and little gimmicks and little cliches, and I like kind of pulling them apart and seeing what's really underneath the surface. Photography is so important to those of us for whom photography is important, and so to ask and to be vulnerable and say, hey, is this thing that I've just created, is it any good? on some level, we're not looking for an affirmation of that piece of photography. We're looking for an affirmation of us. I remember overhearing him sort of looking at all these other photographers out and going, everyone's a photographer now. And my response internally is, isn't that great? I'm at a loss for why you go to someone's Instagram profile and instead of saying something meaningful, their profile tells you what camera they use. And I think the most enduring photographs, the so-called iconic photographs, they have layers of these things. It's not just one, it's an elegance of composition, it's maybe an element of story, maybe there's some emotion or mood. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of hooks that get into us, and I think this is what makes photography so powerful.
I seem at the moment, David, to be capturing photographers as they're packing their bags to go somewhere very exotic, and you're off to a place I haven't been to for a long time, but I have a great affection for it because it's where my honeymoon was, Kenya.
Yeah.
I
well,
love Kenya.
if I waited until all my friends were back from a place, or we seem to exist in this constant, especially since the pandemic, this constant to and fro. We're always packing and unpacking, and it's kind of a rhythm. And I'm thrilled. It's been a little while since I've been out on the field, and I feel like I breathe the deepest there. So I am very, very excited I've charged my batteries, my SD cards are all formatted, and all the khaki and beige clothing I can find is stuffed into my duffel bag. So I'm pretty excited.
We went on a safari, but we were by the coast. We were at a place called Hemingway's, which is very famous for its fishing. But we did go into the bush, and it was in my earlier photography days, so I didn't really take a lot of kit. In fact, I tell you what I took. I took what were those small Sony cameras called? Do you remember the first tiny pocketable ones? Sony, not Cybershot.
Cybershot was an early digital. And then it went sort of like the most recent was like, of course, I don't know how long ago your honeymoon was, but like the RX 100, the small pocket, but I don't know.
This is 20 years ago. And I remember sitting in this van as we were traveling out, and there was we shared it with a couple, and inevitably you get talking, and he said, well, what do you do for a living? I said, I'm a photographer. And he looked down at my camera and he thought, are you really? I'm not quite sure. It's not the best camera to take on a safari, but I used my eyes and the binoculars. I dare say you are going to be slightly better kitted up for when you're in the middle of the bush.
I am very well kitted up. Although, I was recently introduced to this concept of soul film, the idea that, our strongest memories are, recorded on the inside and have nothing to do with the kit and the gear. And that, as much as I love the experience, and I do, and as much as I love the photography of it, for me, the first thing is always the experience. It's always the encounters, and whether I have the camera or not. I don't want to say it's irrelevant, because I'd be heartbroken if I had to do this whole thing without any of it, or God help you, a little Sony RX 100. But yes, I allow my guests to bring 80 pounds of gear. We charter planes, and that is their luggage limit. And I am sitting somewhere around 79 pounds.
Right,
so I've got plenty of stuff.
What is 80 pounds in kilos?
39.
Well, it's not bad then. 36 kilos.
36, okay.
That's a decent amount of kit, isn't it? Well,
It's plenty,
I'm assuming you mean all their underwear and clothes with it as well, within that. 36.
Yes, although very little of that. All of our camps have free laundry services, so I bring 2 pairs of pants, 2 shirts, and that's kind of it. The rest is all the photo gear and that sort of thing. But don't forget, a rolling duffel bag, which I take to Nairobi. And then leave in a hotel, that alone weighs 9 pounds. So, when if I'm really honest, it's not as much as it sounds, but it's plenty of gear to get me in trouble. And, 3 cameras, 4 lenses, some remote gear, a monopod, a little remote tripod, plenty of stuff.
What are you seeing? What are you hoping to see?
Well, I'll tell you what I was really hoping for. There was a tusker, a big elephant in Amboseli, region called Craig, which I think is a terrible name for an elephant, but just a docile, gentle elephant. And he was born months after I was. He was born just inside of 1972. I was born at the tail end of 71. Yeah. And I was so excited. I booked 5 days at the end of my trip before returning home to go and see if I could find Craig and photograph him again. And wouldn't you know, just after I added this add-on to my trip, Craig died on, I think, New Year's Day.
No.
Which is so sad, and yet at the same time, it's such a victory. I mean, for him to have lived as long as he did speaks volumes about the state of conservation, and he was very well cared for. So he died of natural causes, and but it speaks to my luck, that I would book this and be so excited. And so I will find other elephants, but I'm going to spend some time with rhinos and elephants, and then the usual grab bag of whatever I can find. And I usually kind of get there, and then something catches in my mind, and I'm like, okay, now I've got an idea. If the leopards are particularly numerous or easily found, I might just say, let's go all in on leopards. But for me, it's all about the light and the resulting photographs. There's no specific agenda, but to get on the ground with big tuskers would be the icing on the cake for me.
How many people are with you?
For the first 10 days, I have 11 clients, 11 guests coming with me for 2 camps in the Masai Mara, and then they return home or on to other adventures, and Cynthia and I disappear into the bush for another, I think we're out for another 2 weeks.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I thought in this particular conversation, we're beginning to get a regular little patter between you and I, which is nice, actually.
Yeah, I want the show to be rebranded. My name should be in the...
Hang on a minute. Hold on. Perhaps so. There could be an offshoot of it. Who knows? But I wanted today to lean on, because we have touched business before, but I don't, before people start rolling their eyes and thinking, oh, it's business, I was just hoping David would talk about, the wildlife. Within what I'm going to talk about, of course, up will come the conversation of particular shoots that you've been on. But I wanted to lean today on something that I hadn't really taken a good look through, and I should have done on all the other conversations we've had, which is the vast amount of writing, of photography and stories that you've pieced together for your blog. Long live the blog, and for all those that say it's a done deal and it's not important anymore and just concentrate on Instagram, I would say you counter that with how wrong you are.
Absolutely, I would. And in fact, we could have a series of conversations exactly about that. Yes, social is important for some people, but I think increasingly social is not scratching the itch for, consumers of media, because we're getting fed so many advertisements and the algorithm is everything. But also for those of us who are concerned about, and I'm going to try desperately to avoid the term content creation, because I like to think I create more than just content. I actually think content creation it's in the same category as the word influencer. We don't need more influencers. We need leaders. We need people that think and feel their way through life and share that and create good art. We need neither content nor no one who wakes up and thinks, you know what I need today? My life is desperately lacking in content. Nor do we wake up and think, I need to create content. I mean, some people actually do, Neil. Some people do think that.
Well, I was going to say, my cousin does. That's her job.
Yes, but I think we can do better. I think we can, and it's a paradigm shift that we may just be splitting hairs, but I think the idea of creating content is just, use different words. All we're saying is, I just got to fill the bucket, and I think we can do better. But for those who do quote unquote create content, for those who need to feed the beast, to put stuff out into the world, I would remind you that building your house on someone else's property is a dodgy proposition at best. And people have found this out. If anyone remembers Google Plus, how many, especially for photographers, how many millions of followers some photographers had on Google Plus, and all of a sudden it was, guess what? No more Google Plus.
Well, and the interesting thing is, you would have thought with something like Google Plus, you'd think, well, it's Google, it's going to be here forever.
Exactly.
And that one wasn't.
And it wasn't. And the danger is if you cannot translate those followers, you don't own, quote unquote, those followers. And so the platform closes down. And unless you have some way of getting those people into your own living room, so to speak, your house, your property, you risk, and it doesn't have to be the shutting down of a service. The terms of service could change in such a way that you say, hey, I'm no longer on board with this. Or your audience could say, we are no longer on board with this particular service. Mark Zuckerberg, for example, imagine he suddenly appears on the Epstein files and half of us go, that's it. That's the last thing I needed. I'm out of here. No more Zuckerberg. I'm off of Facebook and Meta. And it wouldn't take much, I don't think. So I think the blog is increasingly relevant. It's infinitely searchable. People find me through my blog. It's a place where people can go and they can read and get away from the algorithm and the advertisements. And so I think there's always going to be a place for a blog, whether you call it a blog, an online journal, a place that is your own, that you can post your own work, your words, your writing, where you can speak to your audience, even if it's only, maybe you're just posting the same stuff that you would otherwise post to social, you could do that. There's a lot of iterations of this, but I think that the wisdom of building your house on your property so that you can speak on your terms to your audience, I think is quite powerful.
There's been definitely a maturing of the way that you
Photography
write.
Daily is a Loading Zone production.
We write blogs. When we started, certainly in business, you would write because you knew that Google liked particular words. And if you wanted to be seen, you had to repeat some stuff. And I think as Google and other search engines come of age, they now want you to be human. They can recognize the humanity in your writing. And that's what is now more sticky. Would you agree?
I'm not sure, because I never really I never was on board with the former approach. I always kind of felt like if I wrote about the things that I'm going to write about, that naturally people would find the things that I'm writing about. I was not, for example, I wouldn't write a blog post specifically about the 10 best travel tripods in hopes that people would find me through that and buy through my affiliate link or something. I wrote about the things that interested me, the things that I thought were concerns for a photographer, growing in his art and his craft. People would find me because of that, and it would be a better fit than me kind of approaching it the other way. I hope with AI and large language models and stuff, if there's any good to come out of any of that yes, the search engines would be a little more nuanced and would guide people to your stuff without the heavy-handed, keywords. But I don't even keyword my photographs, Neil. I'm profoundly sort of lazy when it comes to that, because I just don't want to do it. I don't want to write articles that appease the algorithm. I want articles that appease me. And I figure if I write something that pleases me, that scratches my own itch, that there is a subset of the world out there that would resonate in a similar way. Long term, I think it's a better approach. It's not particularly, quote unquote, savvy, but I think a long term it's paid off, because my voice remains my voice, and people are not attracted to my writing because the keywords are right. They are, when they finally find me, they're attracted to my writing because it's my writing. And maybe that's the difference between creating something that's authentic and valuable to the world, and just creating content. Content's got lots of keywords, but I'm not sure that it's got an awful lot of wisdom or humanity in it necessarily. Again, we could define content in a bunch of ways, but it may be helpful for this conversation to remember that you can write for the algorithm or you can write for you, and the audience is not part of the algorithm.
I'm pleased you mentioned the audience. The audience, two examples of this actually. I went on a writing workshop not long before Christmas, and we talked quite some depth about audience, finding your audience, writing for somebody. And the other example I often give is with the podcast. I have this Well, it's not so imaginary, actually, in my head. Maybe I should be worried about this. But there is the other listener. And that was something that was drummed into me when on my first day, fledgling broadcaster in the BBC at my induction, there was a presenter who came in, a producer who came in and said, right, don't tell anybody. Do not tell the person next to you. It's like a private mantra, this. Think of somebody that you're broadcasting to. Only one. Gender, whatever colour the hair it is, wherever they live, that is the person that you're talking to for the rest of your broadcasting life. And it works for me. And actually, my other listener, as I jokingly call this person, is really important. That's my audience. Do you write in a similar sense? Because the writing workshop also said, find somebody, write to that person.
I do very much. And it's helpful that I know so many of the people in my audience over the years. Those that have continued to read my blog are fiercely loyal. Many of them I know by name. They comment on my blog. I recognize the name and I can recall, either an exchange, or some of them, will come on safari with me. Some of them will buy my books, or I'll meet them at book signings or whatever. So I know them as, in real life people. That's helpful. But I do write to them, but I think the most honest answer is I write for the person that I was, on my journey, say 10 years ago. Because it's really important, I think, for any of us that are creating art, that our audience is, first of all, us, that it's what we want to do. I'm never thinking, what does my audience want? I am thinking, is this clear to them? I am thinking, is this a gift to them? Is it going to serve them, be helpful to them? But I'm never thinking, gosh, what do they want? Because how big an audience do I want to make that? I could get drowned in. There are many people that would love me to cover the basics, talk about the basics, do a series on how to choose your shutter speed. I have no interest in any of I'm not going to do a YouTube video on the best shutter speeds to photograph birds. It's just not. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. It's just not me. I don't pick the one that works. Yes, of course, there are better shutter speeds, but that's not. That's someone else's gig. So it's really important, I think, though, whether you're writing a blog post, making art of any kind, that you are thinking, yes, this will go into the world. It will be enjoyed by their people. But that's you start hearing all these voices in your head, and it's hard enough. So yes, I do write for an audience, but I think if I were to put a sort of an avatar on that, it would be like me 10 or 20 years ago.
Handsome chap, then.
Well, I certainly had more hair.
This feeds very much then into talking about some of your particular blogs. When you sit down to write, are you led with a title? Are you led with a theme? Are you led with what you happen to wake up with that morning? Are you led with a picture? The one I'm going to pick on to start with is one you wrote toward the end of last year called The Power of Mood. And this appealed to me because you were talking about how mood is an emotional tone, how transforming, I'll read your words here, a simple image into a compelling one that is more than visual but also visceral is what you were concentrating upon within this. So you picked an emotion, and often when I write a reflection series. Emotions are the things I write about, and this one is mood.
Yeah, you asked whether it's a headline or an idea or a theme, and it can be anything, and it can be something that one of my audience has written in or said in a comment that I think, oh, that's interesting. That's a question that could be explored, not just between that person and I in the comments, but something that could be explored in a bigger format. I'm looking for springboards of any kind. The problem of mood actually that was part of a sequence of things that I wrote as I was leading up. I had just finished creating a course called Shoot What It Feels Like. Oh. And that had come out of work I was doing with Apple, where they said, could you unpack, mood and emotion in Like, what are the hooks and because I was speaking in that particular micro little case, I was working with engineers at Apple and helping them understand the work of photographers. They knew cameras really well, but they were not necessarily photographers. And so they'd ask me to sort of unpack that. And by the time I did, I realized that I had the makings of something that could be passed on to my audience in a slightly different format. And as I did that, I realized actually, like some of my marketing material for that course plays around this idea that some of the best advice I ever got photographically was don't shoot what it looks like, shoot what it feels like, which is fantastic advice, but it's really low on, okay, but how do I do that? Yeah. And so I set about solving a problem, which was, how do I do that? How do I, recognize mood in a scene? What are the mood cues, light and composition? How do we shoot what it feels like? And so it was a problem that I was stewing over and felt like there was, because the next after the problem of mood, I think after or before it, there was an article called The Power of Mood. And that was all about the emotional resonance of photographs. I think many of us can remember seeing a photograph. For me, it was Steve McCurry's Afghan Girl, his portrait of Sharbat Gula, and I remember cutting it off the cover unceremoniously, deflowering my National Geographic and pinning it on the wall of my bedroom because it had such emotional pull for me. Many of us can look back at a single photograph that impacted us in that kind of way. So I was interested in how do we articulate? I think much of my career as an educator and speaker and teacher has been about articulating things either in a new way or in giving language to something that maybe has just been sort of assumed but never explored, or never explored by me anyway. Because photography is so full of, little shortcuts and little gimmicks and little cliches. And I like kind of pulling them apart and seeing what's really underneath the surface. And if there's not a better way to understand things. And but other times it's just a question, I'm sorting through a thing on my own. And I think that's why my writing continues to evolve and I continue to teach, because I'm always learning. So if I learn a new thing, I will write about it. Maybe not right then. I mean, I feel I owe it to my audience to at least learn the thing with some depth. But sometimes it's just hey, this is a thing I discovered, like a piece of gear. I started 2 years ago using these HDMI monitors that videographers use. Oh yeah. Because every now and then you're shooting a scene and you can't see the back of the camera really well, and I thought, well, why not do what videographers do and put an HDMI monitor on a swing arm. And I just it was a little article I wrote, but a number of people wrote in and said, oh my gosh, I'm getting a little older, it's harder to see the screen. That might be a solution for the thing. And it turns out I don't use it that much, only because it's just an extra piece of gear to bring with me, and I'm already flirting with my weight limits. But stuff like that, it's just I try to share the journey that I'm on with some vulnerability and with a bit of a filter. I don't need to share everything, but I figure if it's interesting to me, if it's helpful to me, if I've solved a problem for myself, maybe that's a problem someone else is looking to solve.
Well, vulnerability is a good word to launch into the next one that I focused on. You wrote a piece called Is It Getting Better? I get a lot of emails, many of them asking me the same thing you wrote. Could you please look at my work and tell me if it's any good? I'm very conscious in these moments of both the vulnerability required to ask someone this question and of the hurtful power of a misplaced word. Now, this certainly rang true with me because I answered an email not that long ago, and I thought I'd answered it with compassion and empathy, but clearly I chose a few wrong words. It's so easy to offend, I know, and there's almost, some people a gold medal at being offended. It's a tightrope, and I don't answer many emails like that. You answer a lot.
Your word tightrope is exactly it. There's a tension there, and it's even harder when it's through email. because people hear what they want to hear. This is the nature of these things. And
I should just say, by the way, we've cleared it up now, and I explained everything I thought that I really meant.
Well, I will say the number of miscommunications I've had, the number of misfires, certainly I have my share. If it's approached well, it can actually be a really great opportunity because it brings people together when you can do your mea culpas and say, look, I'm so sorry, that's not what I meant, it's this. That can be a much deeper exchange than simply, a response that they go, oh, okay, but photography is so important to those of us for whom photography is important. And so to ask and to be vulnerable and say, hey, is this thing that I've just created, is it any good? On some level, we're not looking for an affirmation of that piece of photography. We're looking for an affirmation of us. It's really tricky to thread the needle on that and be gracious and kind. And so the reason I approached it with the article that I did was, is it getting better? Is because too often, through what filter do I need to look to answer that question? There's so many of them. Through the filter of, I've been a photographer for more than half my life, for 40 years. What is a good photograph in my portfolio? Would I look at and say, yes, this is good. It does what I want it to do. It's powerful. It resonates. It's enduring, whatever. That filter must be different for someone who has been photographing for 5 years and is looking for maybe a little bit of feedback on their photograph or, a bit of an attaboy. Maybe what they need to hear is, I see what you were trying to accomplish. You took some risks, and I love that you took that risk. And so on that level, this photograph represents growth for you. And yes, it's a good photograph. Is it going to be a keeper for the next 20 years? Is it going to be in your box set at the end of your career? Probably not. It's hard to answer. But if we can answer with some nuance and ask, what are people really asking? Usually, I try to push people to just say, look, I don't know. I don't know what you've shot before. I don't know what you've shot after. There are so many things I don't know and that make me the wrong person to ask that question. I can guide you and say, are you as a photographer getting better? Does this photograph represent a growth in competence? Does it represent a growth in your creativity? What about this makes you wonder whether it's are you doubting it? A conversation is much better than this binary, yes, it's good, no, it's not, which I'm not sure any of us are really capable of answering for anyone other than ourselves.
One of my first jobs was working for a newspaper, and there was a miserable old guy in there called Old Ron. I reference him now and then. I'm not sure whether Old Ron is still with us. There's a part of me that's thinking, do you know what? I think he's probably so pickled that he probably is.
Could be.
But he was one of the best headline writers ever, because that was his job at Fleet Street. So when there are headlines that I think grab me immediately, such as "Real photographers do what?" ? That immediately piques my curiosity. And it is something we've talked about on the show of late, actually. What are real photographers? What do real photographers do? How do real photographers act? How do they shoot? And that "do what?" with a question mark has occasionally been something I've fenced as well when I've talked about wedding photography and said, well, I shoot JPEG. You do what? But you're a real photographer. There's a great pomposity, isn't there, about how to shoot.
We are so precious about this stuff, and we ought not to be. And so this real, quote unquote, real photographer thing, it is such a bee in my bonnet. I am so tired of the gatekeepers and, the pious lording it over, especially the quote unquote, mere amateurs. I have for so long railed against that. I will meet people wherever I travel that, someone will say, hey, aren't you David? And we'll start talking. I'll say, oh, are you a photographer? Oh, well, I'm not, I'm not a real photographer. Oh, I'm just an amateur. And I say, hey, hang on a sec. I say, the word amateur means to do something for the love of it. And there is nothing mere about being, doing something for the love of it. I think just because you make a paycheck doing something does not mean your work is excellent. There's plenty of people making good money that are creating what I would consider, to be rubbish. They're repeating themselves. They found a spot on the cog and it works for them, and that's fine. But this need to sort of say I'm a real photographer, and I remember I saw someone in Venice and he was all kitted out. He had the vest on and the tripod and this guy was probably shooting on a wood burning, I don't know. I remember overhearing him sort of looking at all these other photographers out and going, everyone's a photographer now. And my response internally is, isn't that great? Isn't it great that we have democratized this already democratic medium to the point where people can go out and find the same joy and explore the same things, with fewer barriers? And there are some people who don't think that is great. They want to be the elite. And so I'm kind of done, because there's plenty of things that I do that others, little confessions that I have to get out every now and then. The state of my camera bag, once I start shooting, it's like a rummage sale in there. My stuff goes wherever. At the end of a trip, it's a collection of lens caps in every pocket. And because the lens cap hasn't seen the front of a lens for 2 weeks. I don't necessarily treat my gear well. I sometimes I remember my first book came out Within the Frame, and there were, the little usual EXIF data underneath photographs, and I would get emails going, I saw this photograph, I really like it, but what led you to choose an ISO of, 1600? It's a bright exterior scene. So why and I'm like, I'll tell you what led me to do it. I was inside, I was in a mosque, it was really dark. I came out, I got distracted by, oh my God, look at that. I raised the camera, I made as quick a decision as I could. And the ISO stayed where, I had a split second. Are the settings ideal? No. Are they relevant at all to the photograph? No. But I made the picture, as opposed to screwing around with the settings and getting them picture perfect and missing the shot entirely.
Do real photographers use auto ISO?
Oh, this quote unquote real. But am I? I don't know. If they do, then I'm not a real photographer. But we are so precious about it. I use a fully manual. I shoot fully manual with auto ISO, which puts it into the realm of a program mode. I work my EV compensation like a rented mule. Like I found my way of working, and I love it. But I've used AV. I've used shutter priority. Not often shutter priority. But real photographers use whatever it takes to make the photograph, and they think about the process and the photograph. I'm at a loss for why you go to someone's Instagram profile and instead of saying something meaningful, their profile tells you what camera they use. I'm like, nobody cares. And forgive me for, I'm not trying to be iconoclastic and I'm not trying to put anyone down. But if we're going to put anyone down, let's not put the amateurs down who are trying so hard just to make a photograph. For those of us who know better, let's set an example and not be so preoccupied with the silliness of, because you're so proud of that new camera and you put it on your Instagram profile. You're going to change it next year when you upgrade to the Mark II, when the new one comes out and you badmouth the one you just now are so proud of. We're so funny about adventures and missing the point.
Now, I'm going to be cautious here, but while we're on this subject...
Oh, throw with caution to the wind. Come on now.
I'll bung a little out then. Camera clubs. Now, there are some terrific camera clubs, but they can be gatekeepers. Do they need to lighten up?
I think we all need to lighten up, whether we're in a club or not. But yes, let me put it this way. I think because I serve as part of my audience. Camera clubs are right up there because they're an older demographic and they're passionate about what they do. And but here's my but on this. As you said, there are some excellent camera clubs. There are some that are not, I think, doing as well as they could be to serve their members. I think photography is an individual pursuit and it needs to be pursued individually. You can learn in group settings. There is a role for that kind of thing. But in terms of finding your voice, in terms of once you've learned shutter speed, ISO, your exposure triangle, you've learned the basic, you very much need to pursue that on your own without other voices influencing you. And I worry about camera clubs and any sort of milieu context that is susceptible to groupthink.
Yes.
Because it encourages us towards uniformity, not individuality. It encourages us towards a certain, what are the camera club judges going to think? And instead of responding to a photograph that you see and go, oh my God, I love this, and to you is a strong photograph because, as we talked about before, maybe it represents a step forward, maybe it represents a risk or just a new technique. Finally, you nailed panning, and there's something in that image that just makes you go, oh my God, it's just finally. And then you put it into, again, not necessarily a camera club, but any circumstance in which others are weighing in on it. And the number of emails that I have received from people saying, I quit. I'm out of camera clubs. I'm out of competitions. By the way, I look very dimly on competition too. So, because they've had a harsh word spoken to them, they've been told that they should really just quit and go back to their real job. I mean, there are some very harsh people out in the world in every context that, given a choice, would rather, in order to think more highly about their own work, have to think themselves higher than others. And I think that's truly unfortunate. So I think you need to be careful of which voices you listen to and where you learn from, where you get your input. Most stuff like this is better done one-on-one. It is better to have a mentor that will look at your work and ask you questions before they trash your work or before they overly praise it. We can be damaged by both voices. We are not served by the sycophants who say your work's the most amazing, and then we think that that our craft doesn't smell bad, and we create we never move forward in our craft. So I'm very leery of any of those contexts. I think competition, there are people who get something out of it, and I would never take that away from them. But for me, I have no interest. I've entered one competition in the last, I think, probably dozen years, and that was only because the entry fee went to conservation, and my guide asked me to enter because if I won, he would get a prize. And I was like, of course, sure, that's great. So I entered, I entered a few images, and the money went to conservation.
Did you win? Did you win?
I placed somewhere in the top 10 or something. Right. But no, and I as long as we're talking about winning and using, I think competition is so silly because it's like, well, can you win at yoga? That's what I always fall back on, is like, you're winning at an unwinnable thing. But having said that, the gentleman that did place first had a stunning photograph. I mean, it was just, it's the kind of photograph that you look at and go, oh my God, it's just, it was gorgeous. But is that a matter of talent? Is it on some level? Is it a matter of work ethic? Absolutely. Is it a matter of being in the right place at the right time? Yes, of course. I'm just not sure what we're meant to take away from these things, other than, I don't know. I can't win or lose a thing and find anything teachable in it. Yeah. Because all it says is that thing didn't appeal to that particular judge or panel of judges. So be careful the voices you're listening to. I guess that's all I'm saying. And if camera clubs work for you, figure out what it is about it that works for you. And every now and then check in with yourself and say, does it still work for me? Has it run its course? Or maybe it's time that you graduate and move into the leadership and provide some kind of different direction for that. So I don't want to write off camera clubs, because I know some great camera clubs, and they've hosted me, and they have been places in which we can have some really meaningful conversations. But we've always done it this way. This is what a real photographer does. This is what a real photograph looks like. I have no patience for that. Life's too short.
Silver bullet time. What makes the image work? You did a 2-part series in this, actually. What does make an image work? We've touched on this with you before, actually. We've dallianced around what makes the perfect image. How do you make it?
I do like a good dalliance.
Yeah. There was a sort of a half French, half English moment.
Indeed. Well, we've had a milieu. We've had a dalliance.
Well, I thought you might appreciate that.
I do very much. Thank you.
Come on, then. So this is not a simple question to answer. But
no, it's very much not.
In fact, you did the brave thing of asking people to write in, and you put one of your images up and asked them to discuss what they thought worked with it.
I did, and candidly, that was also part of the launch of a course called ImageWorks, because the idea of what makes a photograph work is so complex. But I think we need to be able to put handles to some of this stuff. We need to put handles and words to what we wanted to accomplish, because does the image work at all? Well, it depends what you wanted to accomplish and for whom, because there are some people, like the image that I posted on my blog and said, what makes this image work? Every year, 'cause I do this once every year and a half, I release this course, and every year at least one person says, well, the image doesn't work. And I'm like, okay, well, tell me, put words to this. Why does it not work? So clearly I'm not scratching the itch for them with that photograph, but there are so many things, and it begins with, what do you want to accomplish with the photograph? By what standard would you judge if it had worked? Do you want it to feel immersive, and therefore you choose a low point of view? And maybe that's all that it takes. Maybe it's a 24 millimeter lens pushed in close to the subject and very, very low. Shutter speed really doesn't play into it as long as the exposure is good, the aperture, whatever, the ISO, who cares? And other times those elements are what make it work. It's a panning shot, and without 1/15 of a second, the sense of motion would be eradicated, and you wouldn't have accomplished it. Other times it's how the colors work. Other times it's the scale of the image or the choice of the moment. Sometimes it's all of these things in layers of impact that are just, and I think the most enduring photographs, the so-called iconic photographs, they have layers of these things. It's not just one, it's an elegance of composition. It's maybe an element of story. Maybe there's some emotion or mood, but there is no answer to that question, what makes an image work? Because that's like saying, what makes a song work? Well, what kind of song? Some it's just purely the drum solo in the middle. Some it's purely the lyrics. Usually it's not just one thing. But there's like one thing that's just like, oh my God, I love that. It's the intro to Stairway to Heaven, or whatever. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of hooks that get into us. And I think this is what makes photography so powerful, is it's not just a question of, I know how to expose, I know how to focus, I can make a good photograph. It's far more powerful than that. And the opportunities to learn and be creative and play with all of these elements. Does the color work? Is there a mystery? Is there mood? Is there, all of these things. Which we'll never get to, by the way, as long as we're focused on, the shape of our histogram and how tack sharp our subject is. These things are important to a degree, but they're insufficient when we're talking about a compelling photograph that resonates.
I always wonder, I suggest when I'm asked, is there another sense within the photograph? And what do you mean by that? Well, can you hear it? Can you smell it? Can you feel it? Is it a hot image? Is it something, if it's, for example, I was talking recently to David Wright, the National Geo photographer, and I was talking about one of a particular image I'd seen where there was a scene of the snow falling on water, and I could feel the cold, I could feel the breeze. So if I can feel another sense, and for me that's what makes a really compelling photograph.
Yeah, it's one thing probably among many that pulls us into the world of the image and hooks us. And so for me, it's the idea of a hook. Is there something there? Maybe it's just a glance between two characters in the frame that creates a sense of story. Maybe it's a juxtaposition that creates a bit of a things that make you go kind of moment. Elliot Erwitt was so good at doing that. His juxtapositions would be the kind of thing that just make you smile or chuckle. I mean, the fact that he had wit right in his name. I was a comedian for 12 years, and I there's nothing funny about my stuff. He can still find it online.
He can still find it online, by the way. Your comedy.
What's that?
Your comedy.
Oh, let's not go. So changing the subject entirely.
I can edit that bit if you wish.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's fine.
I enjoy it.
Well, thank you. It's you have to look at it as being performed by a very different human being than the one that sits before you.
But that's about how we grow, isn't it? As
of course it
not
is.
Just as entertainers. I'm talking about as creatives, because that's why I particularly like. Sean Tucker talks about this. He says in his Instagram, if you go all the way back, you will see the very first stuff. He did not take one bit away. He left it all there.
Yeah. And I mean, we're talking about the blog, and I did an article called the I don't know, it was something about the cringe, embracing the cringe, because you do often look back at your work and you're like, the stuff you were so proud of, and you put it up and it was just, and now you look back and go, oh, why, what was with the heavy vignette, or God help you, the white vignette, or I had a love affair with a Stingray blue gold polarizer for a while. God help me, I use that friggin' thing for everything. And I look back now and go, oh, like it might have been the right tool for one or two pictures, but when you're a hammer, everything's a nail. Why? I hammered a lot of stuff with that filter. Yeah. But to look back and cringe is a sign of growth. It's a sign that your tastes have changed. It's a sign that you've moved on. I worry more about the stuff I look back that's 20 years old and I'm still fiercely proud of it. I'm like, have I really not got... And there's nothing wrong with that, but I want to grow and change as an artist, and I'm not sure that what did it for, the 35-year-old David is not what does it for the 55-year-old David, nor should it.
I probably shouldn't have done, but when I was looking through the blog and highlighting a couple of pieces I wanted to talk to you about, I inevitably chose one that had lots and lots of comments. I had to go to one that had hundreds of comments, and that was the one about it was a word about art making. There's an ellipsis on it in the introductory piece that I want you to expand on. One of the happy perils of posting your work online is the very real possibility of criticism. And I know we've been here, but I'm hoping you might have a different take on it, or a different stance. I suppose posting it anywhere exposes you, but the internet gives people both a microphone and anonymity. Things get said online that would never be said in person to another soul. The internet, especially social media, emboldens us. But it's not only the internet. Ellipses.
Yeah, I mean it's mostly the internet, but people are getting quite emboldened. So I think let's back up. I think it's a paradigm thing. I think especially among photographers, because let's face it, that's when you're showing your photography, if it gets criticized and shot down, if negative things are said, it will be by other photographers. Make no mistake about it. The writers are not weighing in on. It's the photographers that are going to find some reason to bitch about it, and it often starts with some kind of either the words or the thought behind those words that was like, well, if I was making this picture, and I think there's something actually profoundly dangerous about this, and that is the idea that art should be liked. I do not make my art for people to like. Now, I'm not an avant-garde artist. I'm not, questioning deep existential stuff. Art, I believe, should be listened to. It should be experienced. It should be, we should go in with questions, not answers. What was the artist trying to say? Did they accomplish it? But when we go in with our first response is, well, I don't like how okay, but nobody asked you. Like nobody. Occasionally, when a photographer puts their stuff up on social, they'll post like a black and white one and a color one, and they're like, I don't know, which one do you think? And I'm like, stop asking the internet. We should all never, ever ask the internet anything, because the internet as an impersonal entity is going to respond, God help us. And they will respond with all kinds of nonsense. And you're the artist. You should tell us, is it a black and white picture or a color picture? Could be both. That's fine. And there's nothing, I guess, innately wrong with asking the internet. I'm not foolish enough to do it, because people will respond. And I guess I get so frustrated, because that's not how we learn to find our voice. We do not learn to find our voice by asking other people what they like or whether they respond to it. And so as photographers, to experience someone else's work and go in straight with here's how I would have done it, is to miss the point entirely. one, they weren't asking you most of the time, and two, they were probably trying to accomplish something very different. So the learning opportunity is to say, what was the artist trying to accomplish? To rush in with criticism of Monet because you don't like quote unquote impressionism because you're a traditional painter and this stuff doesn't fly in the Paris salon. Thank you very much. Or to make some comment about Picasso because your 4-year-old could have done the same thing is to miss very much the point and miss the opportunity of what was the artist trying to accomplish. The hubris that we go into other people's art with is it's mind-boggling. So I guess I'm not sure where I was going with that ellipsis, except to say it really isn't. I mean, the voices are everywhere, and we need to be careful who we listen to. We also need to close our mouths occasionally. I'm like anyone else. I, as a photographer, will look at something and immediately jump into, well, if I had made that, what choices might I have made? Or, as a teacher, I'm looking for certain things or a reason to write a blog post about it. Who knows? But the instinct I am trying to nurture in myself is first to listen, to look at a piece. And it's easy to look at non-photographic work and sort of apply this. So I can look at something like a piece from Kandinsky, who is not my cup of tea. I wouldn't hang his work on my wall, but there's something to be learned there. And he is never he's not asking me what I think. Never mind the fact that he's dead. It was never his concern, nor was it the concern of Picasso when he painted Guernica, or Monet when he was engaged in painting his lilies. There was a specific thing there, and it was primarily to scratch his own itch and find his own voice. I just think we really need to be careful of both sides of the coin, of either bringing that hubris into our experience of art in general, because it prevents us from being impacted by that art. It prevents us from feeling it. Kandinsky famously wrote that he didn't want people to understand his art. He wanted people to experience it, to feel it. You don't listen to jazz and go, well, maybe some people do. You listen to it and go, I don't understand this. You're listening to, a piece by Mozart. You're not saying, I don't understand this. It's not a thing to be understood. It wasn't created for that. It was created to be experienced. You may not experience it the same way, but it's to go into that purely from the perspective of a critic is to miss the point entirely.
That actually plays beautifully into the last blog post I want to talk about before I have a couple of questions generally about blogging. And if I may mention Picasso for a third time, actually, since you've mentioned him a couple. When Picasso was asked if he knew what his paintings would look like before he'd even put paint to canvas, he said, of course not. If I knew, I wouldn't bother doing it. And it was all part of a wonderful piece called The Adventure of Art. I'm not sure, by the way, whether I might have also been drawn to this piece by the fact I am an incorrigible and very boring plane and helicopter nerd. And I recognised the aircraft you were sitting in immediately by the restraint and also by the tail features as being a Robinson R44. So,
okay. I've spent a lot of time in R44s.
Yeah, well, they're a very good helicopter to photograph out of. But adventure, you were talking about the adventure of art. Art is such an amazing adventure, isn't it? I feel so lucky to have expanded my adventures into going abroad. I know you don't have to go abroad. You don't have to go to Kenya. You don't have to go to India and Bangladesh, which is two places I will be going to and at as this feature goes out. But it is an adventure, and what a wonderful way to find yourself culturally immersed in what is a better world than the one that we often see on the news.
Mm-hmm. Very much. And I think that, but there are people who will take their cameras everywhere and they will have extraordinary adventures.
Absolutely.
I do. So I have two things I think about that. One is there are also people, some of those same people who will go to those places and only ever see what they want to see. They will come home none the richer. They will come home having checked lists and tick the boxes. They'll come home with the postcards, or as my editor often talks about for my books, he says, are we just getting a receipt? Is that what the pictures are? We're just getting a receipt, proof of purchase. Yeah. And that is a risk, that we go to a place and only see what we want to see, that it doesn't change us, that we don't immerse ourselves, that we don't get lost in the back alleys. And I would argue it's not an adventure if there is no aspect of exploration. But that can happen at home too. I was, as you know, I'm now an amputee, but what led up to was an accident in Italy. I shattered both my feet, blah, blah, blah. I had some surgeries. And on one of those repeat surgeries, I was sort of out of commission for 6, 7, 8 weeks and hobbling around. And I engaged in some macro photography. One of those experiments was, because I also like a wee or not so wee dram of whiskey every now and then. One of those experiments, I was sitting there and I had some whiskey, God help me, it was on ice. And I know that's but whatever. Yeah. I'm no purist. What does a real whiskey drinker do? I don't know.
There's a whole blog post on that one, I'm sure.
Exactly, there is. A little niche, but I got out my camera and my macro lens and I started photographing the light. The glass was sitting there and there were water droplets on the glass from the condensation and the cracks in the ice and the color of the whiskey, and the light was coming through. And I did a series. If you look back in my blog, you can find it. It's called Whiskey Shots. It wasn't a big series. It was a couple of evenings of, drinking whiskey and commiserating with myself and photographing in the evening light these whiskey glasses. And I felt I was exploring galaxies. I mean, when that lens got in really tight and the way that the starbursts within the ice played with the light and the color and whatever was in the background, I had the time of my life. It was just, and it was an exploration. It was, it was not an adventure in the spirit of Shackleton. It was just me taking an hour with a glass of whiskey, but I got beyond my first impressions. I got beyond the obvious. I asked a lot of, what if I do this? What if I do that? There was a lot of failure, some false summits, and eventually you get there and you plant your pole on the top and go, wow, that was really great. For God's sakes, it was just macro pictures of whiskey and ice, but I had a fantastic time. And I think there's something bigger to be said about the adventure of art in the sense of exploring who we are as people, our likes, our tastes, things that are beyond, our comfort zone, even if it's just creatively, even if it's just, not everyone can travel, not everyone has the mobility, not everyone has the finances. You may just be stuck at home. I've got some pheasant feathers on my desk over there in the studio that are next up. I bought a new macro lens and I'm going to play with the colors because they shimmer and sheen when the light hits them at a right angle and there's texture and pattern and that will be an exploration all its own. Maybe not adventure with a capital A, but it's exploration and it gets me beyond myself and it teaches me and I place a lot of value in that, whether it's in Bangladesh or, your dining room table, getting beyond. Because for some people, let's face it, for some people, going to Bangladesh is not outside of their comfort zone. For me, going to Kenya is no longer really, I will find an adventure, but just going to Kenya is a little bit like, I know where I'm going. I know who's picking me up. I know the locations we're going. I will find an adventure in there, but it's not, whereas I think I'll have a hell of an adventure. Absolutely. Exploring these pheasant feathers and a new piece of gear that I have friends that have dived into not just macro but micro photography. And are looking at crystals under microscopes and others that have got telescopes and are now photographing pattern and swirl and color in actual galaxies. And they don't leave their backyard to do it.
There was I can't remember the photographer's name. My eldest son absolutely adored his work when he was more into art, and it was a guy that took little Lego figures and made macro worlds with them in his back garden. And it was fantastic, beautiful storytelling work. It was great. I've just found, by the way, Whiskey Shots.
There you go.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, some of these shots, you think, am I underneath the ocean here, looking up through the bubbles?
Exactly, and I think that's the beauty of abstraction, and you can do it with the same period of time. Cynthia would bring home vases of flowers for me, and I would explore the color and abstract them. So it was like, well, is it a flower? What kind of flower? It doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is form and color and shape and line, and you can do it with almost anything. You mentioned, toy photography. Toy photography is having a moment right now. Yes. I don't get it. Like, I look at it and like, it's just Lego. It doesn't. But some people are like, that's their whole thing. Great. There's no reason that can't be an act of exploration and storytelling, and it doesn't have to appeal to me. I mean, I don't like Japanese anime either. It doesn't mean that, what's that got to do with me? That's just not my way. But there's whole industries,
You don't get Lego? How very dare you?
No, I understand building Lego. Don't get me wrong. I understand building Lego. I just don't understand photographing it, because that's not my thing. But my thing doesn't have to be everyone's thing, nor does their thing have to be mine. This is the beautiful thing about diversity. And again, when you approach art with a listening perspective, you go, oh, that's interesting. What were they trying to accomplish? Rather than just go, ugh, I don't like it. It's also in there, knowing your voice enough to know, that's not really for me. That's fine. But it doesn't mean it's bad photography. It doesn't mean it doesn't resonate with others.
Well, I'm going to ask one final question, because I know we're a little tight for time, and I'm going to quote Shakespeare.
Oh God!
Well, I'm going to try and quote Shakespeare if I can.
Do it right, man.
I think this is Hamlet. I think, to blog or not to blog.
That is
the question. What's whether 'tis nobler in whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows? Oh God, where does this go?
Outrageous fortune.
Oh, something like that.
Yeah, something.
Yeah. Go on then.
I can mouth along with it if you said it. I can't conjure it from the recesses of my mind right now.
That wasn't bad for my memory from school, I thought, but we've approached blogging in terms of why it's good for you, and it's been fascinating to talk about. We've only, I think, talked about half a dozen in an hour and a bit. But it's been fascinating to talk about the whys behind the articles that you've written. Clearly, it's a good thing for you to do. You're a professional photographer. It's a great way to meet and talk to your audience. Is blogging still worth doing if you're... Can I use this and backtrack through our conversation? And I'll say this
absolutely
with a smile. If you're just an amateur.
Yes, because you're not just an amateur. Yeah, I don't believe in this imaginary line. So you're not.
I was listening. Yeah.
We all do what we do, and it doesn't matter whether you make money at it or not. It doesn't matter, frankly, whether anyone thinks you're good or not. There's a thirst and a hunger to put our work into the world. For many people, there's a thirst to have some impact, to make a difference. So here's where I would like to pull back your lens a little and say, yes, absolutely, the blog is still absolutely relevant. It is a way to get people onto your territory, to discover your work, you can link to other articles. It can really be a place where people deep dive into this. What I would encourage you, whether you ever start a blog or not, find a way to communicate with your audience in a way that is truly authentic to you and is a gift or a value to those who will read it. Get away from the idea of influencer, get away from the idea of here's a picture with a banal caption, and find a way to have some impact. For some people, they're not great with the writing of words. I have a sickness. I can't stop writing words. Some people, instead of having a blog, will have a YouTube channel. I still would prefer that people have their own real estate, but YouTube would be a place you could put your stuff, or you could do a YouTube style show and place those videos on WordPress, or both, but find a way to put your work into the world and put yourself, because that's what we do when we put our work into the world. And I think the rewards are great, the risks also, but the rewards are greater as you put more and more of yourself into the world, as you are vulnerable with your struggles in art making and share your victories. Too many people are all about the victories. You go onto their social and it's like they've never made a photograph that doesn't stink in their life, and they post their awards and they post all the highlights, but they don't post the struggle. And I think that gives a false sense of who they are. It gives a false sense of what art making actually involves. But also, I think it robs them of the opportunity to really actually connect with people. I put my failures up there. I mean, I don't put my dirty laundry up. There's no reason for me to. But anyone that has read through everything I've written is probably a very old person with no time, with plenty of time on their hands. But they probably also know that I've gone bankrupt, that I've been divorced, that I had my accident in Italy, I had my amputation, that I've had plenty of defeats, and that I struggle with art making. I mean, to the point where someone once wrote in and said, I'm done, David. Your angst is exhausting. And I was like, it's exhausting for you. You should try being me. It's really tiring. To put out like yourself into the world, not just your best work and your 5 stars, is an opportunity. And with that comes connection. And with connection, that's where you're going to get people that will, to make this really pragmatic, which is not the reason I do it, but it is pragmatic. That's where people will buy every print you put out. That's where people will buy every book, every course, every whatever it is that you put into the world, and give an audience an opportunity to exchange value for value and pay you for your work, or even just pay attention. That is a form of currency, to pay attention to what you create, to your ideas. The more you connect with them, the better. And I think that's the missed opportunity, whether it's blogging, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, whatever, is people are approaching this as though the connection is automatic, as though putting your best photograph up is going to make you go viral. Look, the worst thing that could happen to me, if I woke up tomorrow and someone says, hey, your post has gone viral, that would be a very bad day for me. I don't want my post to go viral. I do not want suddenly 1 million people that don't know who I am weighing in on my work, criticizing my work. They have no context for what I've done. So immediately it would just be this deluge of people. Now, out of that, I might get some people that find my work and go, yeah, this guy's for me. But this is art is not a numbers game. How many people knew, probably as many people, I'm guessing, Neil, but I would guess that on any given day, not a lot of people read Shakespeare in Shakespeare's time. There's probably as many people that in that, like comparing Shakespeare's time to mine, that are reading my blog that at any given time were reading Shakespeare back in his day. Am I as good as Shakespeare? Am I as enduring? No, but the numbers don't matter. I don't think that having 1 million people matters. In fact, I have very, very close friends that have above 5 million followers. They don't have the same loyalty from their audience that I do, and I have a mailing list of 50,000 people, because it's just a follower. It's just someone who wants to see a quick picture of a thing, and it's just there's no engagement. Engagement matters. Connection matters, loyalty matters, depth, humanity, impact. These things matter. The fact that I got another 10 followers on Instagram is irrelevant, because they may be bots. 9 out of 10 of them could be bots. They may not be coming for what I'm actually offering. They may not like it. They may be following me, purely out of a desire to see me. I don't know. But the numbers mean nothing. Is blogging still relevant? Yes, but only because connection will always be relevant, only because impact will help you do the thing you want to do as a photographer, which usually for most of us is to get our work into the world and convey a feeling, an idea, to spark curiosity, whatever it is that, really scratches the itch for you. Connection will do that on a deeper level. And I think blogging is one of the best ways to do it. But again, I look at it more as are you serving? Are you putting a gift out into the world? Are you connecting with them? Are you giving people an opportunity to really, truly connect with you, rather than, which is so often what happens, just the endless scroll? Are you just making content because that you're not serving you, you're serving Zuckerberg and the algorithm. But there's a way to use that tool rather than being used by it. And I think that's in service of connection and putting your work into the world. And to me, that brings joy. And, that partly comes from the connection, knowing real people are experiencing my work, and it comes from the impact, knowing that it makes a difference, that I make someone out there feel a little better about their art making, feel a little less alone, or just see a picture of a cheetah and read the story about it and go, oh my God, I want to experience that for myself.
And my sincerest of thanks to David duChemin, plus David Wright, and then Giles Penn found a couple of weeks ago for the special editions, which have been running while I'm on my adventures in India. I'm standing at the top of a building at the moment, looking out across the city here in Kolkata. As I say, I'll be in Varanasi as this show is going out. It's difficult trying to keep up with these leaps. But you'll hear an India special in the coming weeks anyway. So, we need a song to finish with, a play-out song for you to think about what's been said today. And actually, it's a travel song. It's from Hans Johnson, who's one of my favourite artists. It's a song called Awake East Africa, which really is in homage to the place David mentions within our chat today, or has mentioned his adventures to and his love for Kenya and East Africa in particular. So a Latin end to last week and a Kenyan influence to this week's. A song just to walk a little further with as you think about what's been said today. A couple of important thank yous. Neil Ford, thank you for keeping a watchful eye over IT while I've been away. Andrea Gilpin's been steering Instagram. Kelly Mitchell's been doing the same for Facebook. And Kelvin Brown has been looking after the Flickr group. Plus, Michael Brennan has been building that Spotify playlist so you can listen back to all our show tunes historically. You will find a link to that playlist on the show page today. Right, a postscript. I'm going to go for Paul Strand. He was an American photographer born in New York in 1890 who became one of the most influential figures in 20th century photography. He believed photography was inseparable from having something real to say about the world. And that's why I think this PS works very well with my guest. It was this: the important thing is, said Paul Strand, you have to have something important to say about the world.
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.